started. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I'm not sure if Troy and Sarah Lynn are here. I know Donna's not here. Those are the folks that organize the Community Summit, so I really want to thank them. It's really cool that we have this as a resource every year to come together and talk about what's going on in community. I know I look forward to it, so I want to really thank them. My presentation is called Closing Down Game Communities, How to Plan a Dignified Breakup. I thought this was a really important subject to talk about because I work for Lionbridge Game Services, and we work with a lot of different games, and so of course this comes up more often just by virtue of the fact that we're working on several games, that a game does have to close down. And there really isn't that much written as far as best practices about how to do this. And we've learned a lot over the years doing this, and so I thought it would be a good way to share some of that knowledge. Now, that being said, I realize there are folks in this room who also work in community and who have also been involved in closing down game communities. In fact, I would love to see a show of hands if anyone has ever been involved in that process, actually shutting down a game community. Excellent. And then how about anybody who has played a game that has shut down and you've been a part of that community? Yeah, so, I mean, it happens. A game is a life and it ends. It is a relationship and it ends. So it's something that you have to be prepared for. So it was really important to me to talk about this and have a discussion. So I'm gonna try to leave about 5 to 10 minutes at the end. So if anybody has anything they want to contribute, even from your own personal experience doing this, or any questions, I'd love to have a discussion at that time. So I have this quote up: "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all," because that's what you want your community to feel at the end of this process. You want them to feel like it was important that they were a part of this. It's better that it happened and is over than that they were never a part of it in the first place. And I'm going to touch on this several times throughout the presentation, but really what you're trying to do is move people from this feeling of just rage and sadness to nostalgia. That's where you want them to be in the end of this process. And I have this first part because I hold it true, whate'er befall, I feel it when I sorrow most. That's not always there when you see this quote, but it's important because you want people to feel this way even when they're at their saddest, even when they're feeling their worst. You want them to still feel this way. I have an example here up from Starcraft. This, I think, really gives a good example of how you want your fans to feel at the end. You want them to feel like they were a part of something important. They're glad that they were there, even that they were kind of special, that they were and others weren't, and that it's something that they wish that they could explain to other people, that your legacy is going to live on in a positive way. Of course, Asheron's Call is a game that shut down recently. Landmark's another one. I have this up because I feel like this shows really there is a personal relationship between people who play your game and the game itself. People feel like, especially if it's been going on for a really long time, like they grew up there or like they went through a significant part of their life with that relationship with your game. And so all the more you really need to be respectful and thoughtful and about how you break up. And then I just have this up because I have a really good friend in Seattle who is just diehard Seattle Sonics fan, and literally to this day, he still puts up happy birthday to any person who was ever on the team, ever. It's been 10 plus years since this game left Seattle, and still it's something that is in his heart, in which there's still a legacy for the memory. So, relationship respect. It's really important to think about the fact that your long-term relationship reputation is at stake. You may have other games, you may have a brand that's associated with other games, you may even, as somebody who works in community as a community professional, carry this reputation to other jobs that you take for other games. So you need to think about that. Now, of course, you want to do a good job and be thoughtful because that's the right thing to do, but also it will affect your reputation. They've been feeling it for a while too. There have probably been lots of rumors about the fact the game's going to close down, and you are going to have to deal with this fact that some people are going to feel they've been made a fool of a little bit. That's something you're going to have to address. And get it together before you speak. I cannot stress that enough. That's really what is going to make the difference. If you're thoughtful in the way that you conduct this process, it's going to change. It's going to make the outcome much more positive. People are going to feel that you cared enough to have things be coordinated in this end phase. So at the beginning of any, when a closure is planned, you need to put together a closure timeline. So some things to really think about when you're putting that together are that the communication is synced across channels. So that's social media, forums, official, unofficial, English language, non-English. All channels need to have this closure announcement made in a way that is synced. You also need to make sure that your PR, customer service, marketing are all on board, because as you know, as far as your players, your customers are concerned, it doesn't matter who's speaking, it's your game. Internally, sometimes we start to think, oh, that's PR, that's marketing, but they don't care. If somebody in marketing is saying one thing or customer service saying another, it's confusing, and it gives an impression that you're not being thoughtful about how you get this information out. The other thing is really that everyone knows when and what to say. Internally at your company, even people who aren't really typically client-facing all the time, everybody, because of social media or just really because of the way that people interact and communicate, they are going to be talking with people about what's going on, and you need to have a time when they are given a direct message and really they know what the company line is as far as what's going on. And one thing really I need to stress, which it can be overlooked, unfortunately, is that the registration is disabled by the team. So as soon as you make the announcement that the closure is going to happen, you have to make sure that no more people can join and play your game. That looks really bad if you forget that step. Messaging, so tailored to the channel, and that all of the roads are going to lead to your closure FAQ. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the closure FAQ later. But you need to make sure that your messaging is in line with your community. So as part of your closure plan, you're also just going to put together something that, if you don't already have it, catalogs who's in charge of and what all your channels are. Again, official and unofficial, because fan sites on Facebook can be just as powerful or even more powerful than your own official sites. And when you tailor the messaging, the more personal you make it, the more it's going to have an impact. For example, if you have a group of Russian folks that meet up at a bar and they always meet up at a certain time, drink a certain beer, whatever, you reference that beer when you are making this closure announcement. Just every little thing that you can do to really show people that it's personal and it is some big corporate branded messaging, it's going to make the impact that much better. So some key points to hit in the closure FAQ are why, when, what about all my stuff, what now, and can we still talk? So why? You're going to have to address it. People are going to ask, why is this happening? Now, you can't always be exactly direct about what's going on. You can't give them financials, but it's something you're going to have to address. They want to know why it's happening, when it's going to happen, and you want to put time zone, you want to put exact time. Again, you want people all around the world to know that you aren't just thinking about West Coast US when you put this time up. You are thinking that people need to know what it is in their own time zone. What's going to happen to my stuff? Now, that's a big one. There's in-game currency. People have invested time and money. You have to have a plan laid out as far as what is going to happen and in what time. What now? This is when you have to be a little bit careful with. If you have other games, you can push people to the other games, but you want to not come across as too salesy or marketing-y, especially at a time when people are feeling bad. So it's something to be careful about. And then can we still talk? You know, how long can people keep talking with you through the channels that they currently are? When does it switch over to customer service? Do you even have that option? These are things that you need to outline. This is not a complete version of FAQ, but just minimized so that you can get the gist of it. So some other things to think about are reasonable questions. You know, you all play this game too, so what are some things that you would want to know? The tone. I used to work for Lego on the Lego Universe game, so of course in that game, when we were closing down that game, we spoke to people, from the point of view that they were children, mostly children playing this game. You have to keep that tone that you had otherwise in your community and carry it over into the closure FAQ. Again, pushing people to other games. And then disable comments is really important. You're going to have plenty of spaces online, so again, social media, your forums, other forum topics, et cetera, where people can discuss what's going on. So this is not about stifling conversation, but you want to have one place where it is pristine, where you have exactly the message that is coming from your company, which you can change if you need to later on, but where there's no distracting comments coming in about people who are, saying what is up there is wrong or arguing about it or whatever. That can go on in other spaces, but in your closure FAQ, you want that to be completely controlled by you. So I've got some examples of what I think are FAQs that are done right, and also this is still live, the glitch shutdown. I thought they did a really good job of, again, keeping the tone of how their game had, how they'd spoken with their community otherwise, and addressing all of the major issues in a thoughtful way, and a way that showed they cared. And then I've got Lego Universe up here. Again, I thought we did a good job on that. I like number 2, I think it's a really good example of the tone or thinking about your audience, because why I love Lego Universe. For a kid, the world revolves around them, so they're like, I like this game, how could it be shutting down if I like it? So you really just need to make sure that you're speaking directly to your community as you would otherwise. Adapting editorial calendar. So you're going to want to tailor your campaigns in such a way that you're not just going to throw everything out. Once you make the announcement that the closure is happening, you don't just stop at every fun thing you've ever done in your community. But you're going to tailor it, so again, moving people from this feeling of rage to nostalgia. So I just have an example. I have a very simplified active community for a little game about zoo animals, where when you have an active community, you all know what you're doing is you're trying to get people excited about what's going to happen in the future. You want suggestions for new things. You want them to be showing what's going on right now in the game, and inviting people, and having live gameplay with the moderators and all that kind of thing. Map ideas for new worlds. That's something when things are active. But when you've announced the closure, you're going to want to change that. But it doesn't mean it just is no fun anymore. But what you want to do is you want to take people, take their interests and move them towards celebrating what they have done. So you can do tribute campaigns. You can have, perhaps if you had live play with the moderators, maybe now the moderators put together a topic in the forums where they talk about their favorite people who they played with and what they did and all that. Again, just moving it to this place of nostalgia. So once the closure announcement has been made, that's when you need to start ramping up your moderator hours. So again, this is to the extent that you can do this. Sometimes that's not possible, but it's really important at this time, if you can, to do that, because this is going to be the time when all of these negative comments are just flooding in, and you have a lot of people who are not really contributing positively to the conversation. So this is a time when moderators are really, really important to go through and make sure that what's coming in is productive. Support your team. This is something that's really important to me as somebody who manages people who work in community, because if you work in community, you do really have to have a very thick skin. There's people saying really mean, awful things to you all the time, and to each other. And so, of course, to some extent, you have to kind of be built for that if you're working in community. However, working through this kind of experience can be really more than that, and it really can take its toll on people who are day in, day out dealing with, talking with people who are just completely enraged. So as a manager, you really want to make sure that you are reaching out to people one-on-one who are on your team. If you can, if you work in an office together, get people together. If you work in a virtual virtual team, which is often the case, especially these international communities, have more video chats, send pictures of kittens with hats on. I mean, just really try to engage with people and recognize that this is a tough thing to have to work through. The other thing is reaching out directly to positive users. Now that's something that in community that we're doing all the time. We're always reaching out to people who we see as positive influencers. But in this case, it's another time to really refocus on that, because you're going to find people will emerge, and sometimes they're surprisingly people who otherwise haven't been as active. But they're people that really, for whatever reason, this is where they shine. They shine in helping people through this kind of experience. And you want to focus on those people, contact them directly, but also publicly really give them a lot of attention so that they'll inspire others to do the same. And then updating the FAQ and messaging as needed. This is really important too, because you need to be flexible in your messaging. Of course, like I said before, the closure FAQ, that is controlled by you. But if nobody is understanding what's going on a certain subject, that means that you've written it in a way that's not clear. And so you need to go back there and update that, and even possibly push out additional messaging if it really was unclear in a way that is just gumming up the community. So in the final 2 weeks, again, this is part of the closure plan. You want to have this all really timed out perfectly and make sure that everybody in your company knows exactly when all this messaging is going on. You push out additional messaging via all those channels 2 weeks prior to the closure. The same in-game messaging and also email, basically any way that you have, any means that you have to contact your community, you're going to do that 2 weeks ahead of time, 1 week ahead of time, and 1 day ahead of time, and then of course at the time of the closure itself. And your community is going to notice that this is being done in a methodical way. Again, going back to this whole thing about showing that you are thoughtful in the way that you are carrying out this process is going to pay off. And then this is the end. I realize I'm going a little bit too fast here, so we'll have lots of time for questions at the end. But what you want to do in the end is button up financials. So make sure that all of these, the in-game currency, anything that you've outlined as far as how this should take place, has taken place, and things are refunded. Any kind of disputes that are going on have been resolved. And then you're going to close down all of your channels and make sure that, although there is some dispute there depending on, well, it depends on how much ability you have to keep your channels open, but usually you're going to want to shut down all of your social media channels, all of your forum except for the FAQ. If you have the ability to keep it live for a little while, that's just going to help some people who are confused. And then look forward. You can take pride in what went right and forgive yourself for what went wrong. There are going to be bumps along the way. That's just how it is. And even, of course, if you do it perfectly, there's always going to be people that are upset. That's how it is in community. But as a person who works in community, you have to be able to take what you learned from this and move on and just be proud of yourself that you've done the best job that you can and shown respect to this community of people. And that's just a little plug because we're having a party. Lionbridge Game Services is having a party on Thursday, 6 to 9 at the Press Club. I really wanted to make sure that everybody at the Community Summit knows about this because it's free food and free booze, so I know how community people are. So come on by, and it's just a couple blocks from GDC. And actually, I have little tickets up here if anyone wants that as a reminder. But that's really all that I had. I wanted to give some time for discussion, again, knowing that people in the room, I'm sure, have experience with this kind of thing. So if anybody has any questions, I'm also supposed to remind people that there is a survey that's going to be sent out to you after this is over. So if you could please fill it out. Yeah, and if anybody has any questions or comments or has something that you've had as a personal experience, I would love to hear it. Hi.
Hello, Chloe. I actually work for Total Rock Studios as a
Cool.
community manager at the time when our contract ended with Evolve Stage 2.
Okay.
I can say before I ask my question, one thing that went over really well was we did a video beforehand. I interviewed all the devs talking about their experience and kind of in that nostalgic way and how they felt, and also reassured the community that good things were to come, and it seemed to go over really well. We also took a picture of everyone that was close to the community because we had about 60 devs that were constantly communicating with them on the forums and Discord, and we held up a sign that thanked them.
That's awesome.
And it went over really well.
Yeah.
But my question to you would be, when you've moved on and you're working on a whole different other project, and you still, every time you post on social media, you get those kind of like upset comments. What's the best way to handle that so it doesn't seem like you're pushing your other content, but you also care about how they're feeling, but you want them to know and understand, like empathetically, we're still, moving on and we're trying to survive as a studio and do things that we can to keep, doing what we love. It's not that we don't care about the old project.
So, I'm going to repeat the question. I think what you're saying is when you have another game that you have that is active and people continue to go back and complain about the fact that the previous game is already over, what can you do? Well, I mean, to some extent there is just the I feel for you kind of reaction that you can give. I mean, if they're saying, if some of their comment is about the new game, you can of course speak to that and then say sorry, and if you have questions here, or in some cases, if another kind of fan site has sprung up that's not official that you are cool with, you can push people to that. Even for games that have closed, they still live on in these other ways, but there's not so much you can do. I mean, that does, of course, continue to happen, especially when you are a company that has several games. That's just going to continue to happen. But I think the main thing is like what you're saying is the empathy. Just tell people that you're feeling for them. Thank them for that they loved the game. And eventually that will end. But I do think at that point, I mean, I guess it depends on the length of time it's been. I think there is a certain point where it is okay to start getting a little bit more pushy about marketing to the new game, I guess. Or just, hey, have you seen this? Wow, check it out, in a more overt way. But yeah, I don't know. Is that helpful at all?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
it's not so much that we're trying to market it, but we just want them to know that it's like, look, in our shoes, we just doing what we love. It's not that we didn't care about it or anything.
Right. Well, I guess with that, I wouldn't get too, 'cause even though they will get personal,
Yes.
I wouldn't get too personal in a way that is like, could be perceived at all as defensive,
Right. Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, I would just say I would put it on them more in that you're sorry for their experience versus, we're sorry that it happened because it had to happen for all the reasons you've outlined.
Right. Yeah, it seems they've been adapting. It has
Yeah.
slowed down, so it's a tough one. Thank you.
Cool, yeah, thanks. Hi.
Hi, I'm Sam Ellsbrand, student. So really great presentation. Throughout all of it, you showed us what community managers should do. My question to you is, what are some of the mistakes that you see happen often that community managers do when they close down their game?
Well, I think the biggest mistake can be eliminated by that closure plan, which is that things are not coordinated. So one thing that I forgot to mention when I was talking about that is, some of the departments, marketing, customer service, they might have automatic emails that go out. If you, for example, don't have that coordinated and they have some sort of auto messaging goes out that is as if the game is still going on, that is still in the movement of, acquiring new people, that looks really bad. So that's not necessarily community manager mistake, but that's, as far as the entire process, that's a mistake can be made. And then, taking it personally and maybe getting overwhelmed by the situation and getting into this can happen in any kind of situation when you have a group of people. At a restaurant it happens when, if your boss thinks everybody sucks, then all the waiters think everybody sucks too. You kind of get in that kind of feeling where it's like they're all against us. So I think a mistake that can happen is people they're just getting pounded on by these horrible, really unreasonable comments all the time. They start to get into the space where their skin isn't thick enough, and they lash out. So I think those two things really, again, having things very clearly defined, who's in charge of what, and a timeline, and having that predefined, that will eliminate most of the mistakes.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
So you mentioned that the company creates a world, and people come in and they develop a lot of sort of emotional investment and even economic assets. And then the world gets closed down. And so it just made me think, suppose I was the governor of Hawaii, and a bunch of people came there and they built buildings and got to know everyone. I just decided that it wasn't working for me. So I kick everyone out of Hawaii and I blow it up and send it under the ocean. My thought is, why do the game companies close these places down instead of just releasing them into the wild? Why don't you let people sustain their community?
Right. I think in some cases, actually with Glitch, I think they actually did release it into the wild somewhat. So some companies do that. It's mostly, I think, has to do with brand, ownership of your own brand. So, if you release it into the wild and then it turns into some alt-right something, you know what I mean? And it's associated with your brand, it's a big, big risk. So that is, again, speaking to the thing I was talking about as far as people thinking it's you no matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you would say to somebody, oh, that's actually not my game. They're going to see that mark on there and that character and they're going to think it's you. So that's the main reason. Good question. Yeah.
I'm Garrett. I'm a producer with the Army Game Studio.
Cool.
And while not entirely shutting down a game, what would you say with the steps like we're ceasing development, but the game's still going to be live? It's on live support, it's bug fixing. Mm-hmm. How do you message that without everyone going, oh, it's done, bye, and just walking off? Is there a different strategy for that?
Well, I guess it depends on what your intention really is with the game. If the intention is to keep it going, I would be transparent about that. If your intention is not to keep it going, I would. This gets into the question of your overall business plan because there's only so many resources that you can put on any project. So if you have other games going on and this one isn't really going to make any more money for you, or it's not going to be a focus, and you're probably going to want to have fewer campaigns, less moderation, whatever, anything that costs money, and put it to your other games. But if you're planning on keeping it going long term, I would just based on what kind of need you need for moderators, community managers for it currently, I would base that plan on that going forward. But if you really are planning on closing it down, I would start to, again, it depends on how much you're able to tell people, but I would start to ramp it down and save your resources for games that really are going to be making money for you.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question.
Sure.
When you close down something or you cease development, emotions are really high, and sometimes, as you all know, community members have invested so much emotionally in something. When it goes away, is there any advice you can give when they're kind of imploding and people are reaching out to you from the community talking about even something as serious as suicide based on it, or that everything in their life is going wrong and it's just one more thing? Or I know you mentioned nostalgia. I guess that would probably be the best way to take it, but I wasn't sure.
Well, when it comes to people talking about suicide, you should, as a community manager, have guidelines in place already how to deal with any threat to one's own self or others. So I would continue on that same plan that you have. And as far as people imploding otherwise in a way that isn't dangerous, same thing really is to reach out to people and talk about the good old days, basically. I mean, you should be doing that individually, but also with the way that you put together your editorial calendar, that you continue to push people. You know, if people are just like, so sad, I don't have the whatever X thing to do anymore, hey, we just started a contest that is the best moments from that. Let's take a look at it.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. I did
You're
look
welcome.
up stuff on when it comes to suicide, and most of it was very unfeeling. So it was almost cold, so it was hard to the point where other community members were reaching out saying, please help this other community member, I don't know what to do, but don't tell them, here's the hotline, whatever you do.
I'm happy to talk with you directly about that. That's actually really very important to me, that subject. And it's something that you have to have in your guidelines, exactly a phone tree, what are local resources, what people should do, volunteer community managers and moderators. There should be a very exact plan about how to deal with that. It shouldn't be left to the community to help each other out.
Yeah.
It's pretty dangerous, so yeah.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Alex. I'm working on a game that will close at the end of the year, but for contract reasons, it's actually not doing bad.
Okay.
And the users will be very surprised because of that, because they know it's doing all right. It's the same number of players we had 1 year ago, or stuff like that, and we are not quite allowed to tell them that it's happening for contract reasons. Do you have any advice in this case?
You mean it's like IP, you're not allowed to
Yeah.
renew the IP?
Yeah.
That's a good question because, yeah, I mean, it is one of the things you have to address that. I guess I would say, kind of the catch-all weird diverting resources to other games kind of thing. I mean, you can always kind of go that way. You can't say that the game isn't doing well. You can say that, even though it's popular, it doesn't make sense for us financially, which is true. It's tough, though. It is tough when you have a really active, thriving community where there's no guess that it's coming. But yeah, that is the truth. It doesn't make sense financially if you aren't going to have the contract anymore for that IP. So yeah, you have to be kind of vague, unfortunately, because you can't talk about that directly.
Yeah, thank you. And I have another question. Being a free-to-play games, we have the free-to-play players and the whales. Mm-hmm. Yes. And do you think? So I'm thinking maybe in the last month that everybody should have access to what the whales previously had, to what we could buy on hard currency.
Oh, sure.
Do you think this is a good idea, or maybe it would make the whales even more angry?
I don't think so. I mean, no. In fact, I didn't include that in here, but that is something that you can do at the end, is just pretty much make it like, all right, everybody can have whatevs. I mean, because it is the end. I mean, the whales, they shouldn't be mad. It's like the last month, I think. Of course, you will, again, there's always going to be some people who are that way. But I think generally, more people are going to be happy if you do that. So I would say go for it.
Thank you.
That, yeah. And then I think this is the last question. We'll wrap it up. Yeah.
As you probably know, PR is a little on the abrupt side when it comes to covering your game while it's live, and man, they jump on it as soon as you make the closing announcement.
Sure.
How do you take steps to control the damage when you have media or gaming media cover closure, especially when it's outside of your control mechanisms, like within your own communities? What steps have you seen that works? Not to throw anybody under the, but rock, paper, shotgun,
But,
some of
okay.
the more, they make a business out of, slandering some of the game companies and stuff like that when they go down.
So, so the question is really like the folks in the media, what they do with the story that your PR department has put out,
Well,
like them taking it and.
Whether you put out a PR or not, like if if they catch wind through game communities that a game goes down, boom, they put you on blast on the front page.
Well, I think part of to prevent that even from happening in the first place is to take control of that message and send out a press release. You know, because if they're catching wind of it, that would mean your closure plan has kind of gone awry. You know what I mean? Like if they're catching wind of it from your community versus having received a direct announcement, or seeing that there's actually a press release. I didn't mention that here, but there should be a press release live on your website. Then they are going to be kind of making up stories from rumors. So that's the one thing. But of course, again, there's always going to be people who want to sell more banner ads or whatever and kind of make it more sensational than it is. The only way there is again, to just direct people to the correct information. If you have your PR folks, depending on the size of your company, should have probably direct relationships with some of the people at those companies and reach out to them directly, correct if they have information that's wrong. But there's only so much you can do to control that, other than just, again, have a coordinated messaging in the first place, and then also having a place where people can refer to for the correct, information from your company.
Okay. So I'm sorry. So you would basically, so even if we make all the announcements and everything internally, social networking, would you suggest actually sending out a traditional PR to the media?
Definitely.
Okay.
And having it on your website live.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, everybody, for attending.